today is I want to talk about just a little bit of a review session on Kant, what we covered last Friday before we broke, and just a couple of loose points from that last reading that I want to clear the ground and get everything ready for Wednesday when we dive into the topic of the sublime and the topic of genius, which are really quite big and consuming. So I don't anticipate that our conversation will go very long today, or it doesn't have to. Depends on, of course, the questions and the comments and the discussion. I'm always open for all that. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. But like I said, I'm just going to go through a couple of main points about Kant's theory of aesthetical judgments. Okay. So I'm going to be using the chat as my chalkboard. So Kant is trying to write about what he thinks is the nature of aesthetical judgments, aesthetical judgments. I don't think it matters if you say aesthetic or aesthetical. Your translator seems to be interchanging. And by aesthetical judgments, he means judgments of beauty. And in trying, and what he wants to do is he wants to try and essentially he wants to say what is unique to these judgments as distinct from two other classes of judgments. On the one hand, you have empirical judgments, or their judgments, or and by empirical, I mean, empirical refers to like sense experience. So he's writing this during the scientific revolution. He's thinking of statements of scientific or observed fact, like the sky is blue. You have that kind of statement. You have aesthetical statement, like this rose is beautiful. And that's an example of aesthetic judgment. And then you also have an example of moral judgments. Oh, shoot, what happened? It is wrong. It is wrong to kill, right? You have three different types of statements here. And what he notices, first of all, is that they all claim to be universal objective, right? Moral statements, the three, the scientific statement, the moral statement, and the aesthetic statement, they have certain, or I should say the aesthetic statement has something in common with both of them, but different things in common. What it has in common with, the sky is blue, it sounds to be factual and objective, right? And so right away, he asks the question, when we say something is beautiful, are we referring to the objective properties of the thing? Are we referring to something in the object? And his answer is no. Aesthetic judgments are subjective, okay? They refer to something going on in the subject. They don't refer to something in the object, okay? That's the first thing he tells us. And I'm just going to go through the various distinctions. If you have any questions, raise your hand. Then he also says that aesthetic judgments are disinterested. Actually, I lied. I'm going to turn to you guys and see who can tell me what that means again. What does it mean to say that they are the judgments of beauty are disinterested? Who knows what he has in mind here?
He means objective and not kind of based in context.
Good. I know what you mean, Meg, but I don't like the word that you use the word objective, only because we just said that they're not. But
True.
I think I know you're using it in a different sense. So can we approach that different sense?
I guess impersonal.
Nice.
Unbiased by liking the thing.
Unbiased. I think the word you were searching for, Meg, is indifferent.
Yeah, totally, that works.
To say that an aesthetic judge is disinterested means that when you say this rose is beautiful, you're not saying it like, right, this rose is beautiful is different from saying like that piece of cake looks good. When your friend comes over to your apartment and says that painting looks beautiful, or that piece of cake looks good, you know that your friend wants that cake, wants to eat that cake, right? That's a statement of interest. This is his way of saying that, objects of beauty, they're not useful. They're not useful to us. When we see them and we marvel at them, it's not the same. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion today later when we talk about like when you see when people see a beautiful car or a beautiful house or a beautiful person, that they might be attracted to, these are all expressions of utility, right? Or personal interest. You want to take pleasure in them, physical pleasure. Okay. There is a completely different type of pleasure going on with objects of beauty, he wants to say. There is pleasure, but it's a completely different kind. And it's not the kind of pleasure that we would associate with utility or function. Okay. Now, about them being subjective, this is where it gets a little funky, and we spent some time talking about this. By the way, for those of you curious, this is section 7 we're talking about in the reading. He says, okay, I understand that they're subjective, but what's funny about this statement, this rose is beautiful, which I have in the chat here, is it doesn't look subjective. As we discussed at length the other day, we never say, or rarely say, this rose is beautiful for me, right? That painting is beautiful for me. That sculpture is beautiful for me. We just say, this is beautiful. Okay. Why do we do that? And yet we know that it's not objective. One thing I'm trying to explain to you is that what Kant is trying to do here is he's trying to make sense of how we already understand aesthetic judgments, right? So humans have a very curious practice. We issue aesthetic judgments in objective fashion, but we don't mean them objectively, right? We don't mean to say that beauty is a property in that rose, nor that everybody's absolutely going to say it's beautiful too, right? What is going on here? I was trying to explain to you all, well, the way he puts it is he says that aesthetic judgments have subjective, universal validity. Aesthetic judgments have subjective, universal validity. Can anybody remember how he explained that, or how we explained that? What does that mean?
Is that when you were saying like, I'm looking at the sunset and it's so beautiful. I believe if everyone in the world were here looking at the sunset, they would think it's beautiful too.
Mm-hmm.
So like subjective, but also you perceiving it as universal.
Yeah, like quality that is subjective, but we perceive as objective, and we wish to sort of explain and why it is subjective.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I was saying that there, and by the way, this is from a quote in section 7, and I think section 8, no, 7. He uses the word as if in the middle of that section. He says, he judges not merely for himself, but for everyone, who speaks of beauty as if it were a property in things. We speak of beauty as if it were a property in things. There's a conditional element here. There's a conditional element in the aesthetic. And what I mean by that is, yeah, I guess the way McShafe was putting it, right? Like when I say this sunset is beautiful, what I mean to say is that if everybody could be here and see it in just this way, they would agree, right? So again, the aesthetical judgments, they do not refer to the object, they refer to the subject, they refer to the experience of the subject, what you are experiencing when you see something beautiful, right? And experience is necessarily going to be subjective, but why do we issue it in objective universal statements, right? This rose is beautiful. Why do we put it that way? We are suggesting, he argues, that if everybody could see it in just this way from our vantage point in this experience at this moment, then they would agree, right? This is beautiful. So aesthetical judgments are subjective, but they are universal. And then he says they are singular. And this is my favorite point, although I guess it is a little bit hard to explain. But here is an example. This statement is not aesthetical. It's not an aesthetic judgment. All roses are beautiful. Or just roses are beautiful. Those are not aesthetical judgments according to him. They look it, they sound it, but they're not. It is necessarily singular. This rose is beautiful. That is an aesthetic judgment. This sunset is beautiful. Okay? Those are aesthetical judgments. Why is this? Well, I mean, I think part of what he says is, he says there is no concept of beauty. And this is a quote from, I think, section 8. There is no concept of beauty. And this is a jab at Plato. He wants to deny that there is like some kind of abstract ideal that we mentally tap into when we perceive beauty. He's going to argue in the end that beauty is utterly incommunicable, right? I can't call my wife up and say, I can't see a beautiful sunset to call my wife up and say, it has these colors, it has this breeze, blah. I can never fully describe it in a way to convey to her. She's got to be there with me and see it. That's all there is to it. But his point is also that when you're saying something like roses are beautiful, that's a different type of judgment. That's actually a logical judgment. And I think there's something else going on there, which we haven't yet reached these terms for explaining it, but there's something else going on here that I'll explain later. But his point that I just really want to emphasize right now is that it's got to be singular. It's got to be a singular experience. I do think, and this is where I have a little hard time. Maybe you all can appreciate this more, but I think part of what he wants to say is also that you can't just think up, like a general concept of roses as beautiful. I mean, you all are artists, y'all can draw a rose, right, with the various petals, and you can make it look very nice. But I think his point is also that like the general concept of rose, which can be produced and will be lovely and be on the front of Hallmark cards, will never be beautiful in the way that a singular rose is when I wake up in the morning, walk out and see it in the morning light, dappled in dew, covered in cicadas. I'm just kidding. I don't care about them. But you get the point, right? When you see it in that moment, in that experience with the velvety texture, This could be a problem for artists. It certainly seems that Kant favors beauty in nature. Beauty is, something encountered in nature. Hegel will disagree, by the way. Hegel disregards beauty in nature altogether. And by the way, when we talk about the sublime, Kant is also going to talk about the sublime as a property in nature, aspect of natural experience. But, what does this mean for artistic beauty? I think what it means is that when you cannot capture or convey the beauty of a rose as such, you will create beauty of something else, completely different, right? And I think that's as far as I'm going to go with that. I don't want to get too complicated. Right. And as I was saying a second ago, this is related to an interesting problem, which he relates later on in section 8, which is that, because there's no concept of beauty, we cannot ascribe rules to the experience of the beautiful, meaning the beautiful is always X, X, and X. No, 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 no. Because it is singular, it is incommunicable. We cannot communicate any rules rationally. The object, the beautiful object, must be viewed for beauty to be verified. Yeah. However, he does deal with this point in section 8, which is that, just by the fact that when you make a universal statement, this rose is beautiful, and you enunciate it, like that suggests there is something communicable. What is communicable? Well, what's communicable, he says, is your mental state. Like, I am experiencing beauty. This is a great experience. You should experience it too. Come look at this rose. Let me hit on one more distinction, and then I can open up for questions or comments. So, aesthetic judgments are subjective, universal, disinterested, singular. And then he also tells us that they recognize purposiveness without purpose, which is a very strange way of putting it. I believe this is section 9. I just want to make sure. Yes, 10 and 11. Strange way of putting it. What does he have in mind here? Well, I think there's a recognition of design, but here's the point. Oops. It's a recognition of design, again, divorced from function or utility. In other words, you see design, you recognize it, but you have no idea what it's for. I was explaining to you the other day, I think this is where Kant's religiosity comes in. Although he was largely secular as a figure of the Enlightenment, he was far more secular than his peers, for sure. But there is a recognition of, like, this is created by an amazing creator that transcends my powers. This rose is incredible, and it is so lovingly designed, and I haven't the clue what for, right? Now, funny thing is, he wrote this in the 1700s. Botany at the time was just a beginning, an early science. Now, we largely know why the flower is designed the way it is, and you could say that much of the mystery is gone, right? But you know, still, I think there are other elements of design out there. We have no idea why they are, or they just seem to be like gratuitous intricacy. Like they are intricate for no apparent reason that we can say. And I will give the example of a snowflake, right? Snowflakes, Kant would look at that and say, beautiful, because each is different, each is exquisite, each is seems to be so perfectly designed, and for no ostensible purpose that we can discern or tell, right? So purposiveness without purpose, the recognition of design. And, this might link up with the religious notion, the Christian notion that God, freely created the universe just out of his own joy. It's a popular theological notion, and didn't create it for any, the wonders in creation for any purpose. Okay. At least that we can tell. Okay. So those are the essential points. Let me pause there for a second and see if you guys want to talk about any of this. Anybody have any questions or comments? No? All right. That's fine. Well, we're going to wade into one issue here he raises that I think is a little controversial for you all, and that's the issue of charm. And I really like this discussion that he raises here. How would you define charm? What is charming?
I suppose it's nothing like, maybe it's not intentfully, I'm trying not to use the word charming, intentionally funny or something like that. It's just there's a certain suaveness about their character or something suave about them.
But Jordan, you're working very hard. Why don't you give me an example? Maybe that would be it. Because I think charm is one of these things we know it when we see it.
Yeah, we know when we see it, but we can't describe it exactly.
Give me an example of something that is charming or tries to be charming. Oh, who's that? Sunbeam. Go for it.
Kind of going off of that, I think that
Oh, I can't hear you. Can you up your volume?
I'm not sure if I can. The headphones that I use are weird.
Oh, you're already better. Go
Hello?
ahead.
Hello, can I be heard now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I guess I'll just talk louder. Or is it still too quiet?
No, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I feel like for me anyway, the definition of someone who's charming, or like what exactly charm is like someone who is able to easily impress others. Charm feels very vague, in the sense where it's like a lot of fairy tale protagonists might be described as charming because they're witty or they have like a kind soul to them. I've always seen it as like someone who's able to impress others with ease, because
Okay.
yeah, because like the Pokemon like video games, charm is a move that certain Pokemon are able to perform, and it basically, I think it lowers the stats of the opponent, where it basically lowers their guard because they're so impressed and like, I guess, affected by by the charmer.
All right. Meg.
Yeah, to add on to what other people are saying and like think about examples, to me, one thing that I think other people are hitting on that I definitely agree with is that charm a lot of the time seems like it lacks intentionality or at least like trying at it. Like you
Mhm.
can't try to be charming because that's just like cloying. Um, yeah, and so charm always feels very like effervescent and like it comes naturally. And like one thing that I think of that I think tries to be charming but maybe comes across more as cloying is like, like Zooey Deschanel's roles in movies and stuff like that. But I also think that charm, part of the reason it's seen as incidental a lot of the time is because it is associated with quirk, and kind of like those idiosyncrasies. And I think that's part of maybe what like cheapens the idea of charm to some people is kind of just the like randomness and like, oh, I don't even have to try of it. I don't know.
Good, good, good. Yeah, charm is a little bit of a multifaceted word. I realize that now after asking you all to talk about it. We often, we may use the term to refer to people, right? A charming person. Is a charming person, is there a whiff of insincerity there? I would ask that question menacingly. He's interested in charm when it comes to like, when we see it physically. And it occurs to me here where this comes up, by the way, this is in section, oh geez, 14, I believe. It occurs to me, he is talking now about artistic, about artistic work. So I know I said a minute ago, he sees a beauty principally in nature. He is now turning to talk about it in art, and his view is, you may find it controversial, but he's going to take a stance here, and he's going to say that charm is a betrayal of beauty, basically, in so many terms. Cloying, by the way, who is that? I see that cloying is, Joey. Cloying, what's cloying, guys? Is that a positive or a negative connotation?
I thought of it as very negative.
Yeah, it's pretty negative. What is it?
Isn't cloying like try hard, overly sweet?
Yeah.
Really like aiming to please, attempting to be compelling without actually getting there, and it being
Yes.
kind of obvious that you're trying very, very hard.
Yes. Good. Sunbeam points out the charm, that yes, there's another word like charm that means like magic and superstitious objects. And then she says something that captures the beholder's attention. This is actually how Kant is referring to it. What is charming? By the way, I have a question here. Joey says up references Walter and Margaret Keane, and I don't know who that is. Does anybody know who that is? Anybody want to, maybe an example could be put into the chat.
I'm sorry, who, what is? Or who
Well,
is?
I'm looking at the chat. Joey mentions Walter and Margaret Keane, and I don't know them. So if anybody wants to put an image in the chat of their work, that would be super. Big Eyes 2014. Okay. If you find it, go for it. Charming. Good. Well, why don't we get into what he has to say about it? And I think when we see what he's saying, I think you will understand what he's getting at here. Basically, his point is that, an aesthetical judgment refers to beauty, but an aesthetical judgment does not involve charm. Charm, as he sees it, is a misguided attempt to hit at beauty. It is, that's why I like the word cloying. It tries too hard, if you will, and in trying too hard, it misses the mark. And I'm going to call your attention now to a section in, oh, thanks, McShafe. Is that the one that he was referencing? Let's see what this looks like. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Hang on, everybody. I'm going to, wait a minute. Where am I? Let's share your screen. And you can see there it is. Oh, that's charm. And cloying. And eerie. I'm scared. These scare me. But that hits it right on, Joey. I think so. Oh, you got another one, McShafe. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I see. Yeah. And another one. Good. Oh, I have a question for you all. An example. Well, actually, let me read the passage and then I'll tell you the example I think is pretty classic here. So this is you're reading. This is section 14. I want to take a look at this. This is on page 79. He has a very important passage here that explains what he means. So I'm reading right here in painting. He says, in painting, sculpture, and all the formative arts, architecture, horticulture, as far as they are beautiful arts, the delineation is the essential thing. And here it is not what gratifies sensation, but what pleases by means of its form that is fundamental for taste. The form is fundamental for taste. The colors which light up the sketch belong to the charm. They may enliven the object for sensation, but they cannot make it worthy of contemplation and beauty. In most cases, they are rather limited by the requirements of this beautiful form, and even where charm is permissible, it is ennobled solely by this. And then a few lines down here, to say the purity of colors and of tones or their variety and contrast seems to add to beauty does not mean they supply a homogeneous addition to our satisfaction in the form because they are pleasant in themselves, but they do so because they make the form more exactly, definitely, completely intuitable. And besides, by their charm, excite the representation whilst they awaken and fix our attention on the object itself. Even what we call ornaments, those things which do not belong to the complete representation of the object, but only externally as complements and which augment the satisfaction of taste, do so only by their form. Okay, but if the ornament does not itself consist in beautiful form, and that it is used as a golden frame is used merely to recommend the painting by its charm, it is then called finery and injures genuine beauty. A couple of things I want you to notice here. Form is essential to beauty, according to Kant. Color is not. Color, as Sunbeam indicated, charm is what an artist may use to fix the viewer's attention on the form, but it can be misused to overcompensate. In other words, the beauty of a painting or a sculpture is made by the form. If it's not, then the situation cannot be improved by color. Color is part of the ornaments, right, that an artist or creator might use to try and embellish a piece that can, as he puts it, can injure genuine beauty. So at best, they may call attention to beauty, but they can injure it. Okay. So the one example of the artist that I was thinking of is a guy by the name. Who is the guy? Maybe you guys can tell me. I can't really remember his name, but there is a guy whose paintings used to be pretty popular, and you see them in the mall, and they were paintings of like cottages with snow, and like it was always a cottage with like a little fence and a snow and a cute mailbox. Do you guys know who I'm talking about here? Is this generational thing? Maybe Tanya and Joey and I know who. I think his name is Kincaid, but I'm not sure. Oh, I think Tanya knows.
Thomas Kincaid.
Thomas Kincaid. Thank you so much. And I think I misspelled his name. Oh, yeah. Here we go. All right, everybody. You're in for a treat. Where is it? Here we go. Here we go. This was so popular, this stuff. See? This is so popular. That's charm, right? Oh, wait, that's not Kincaid. That's charm right there. So charming. Charming is
I feel
full
like
of embellishments. Go ahead, Tanya. I'm sorry.
didn't they have images like this, like on like those plates and stuff too? Remember those like collectible
I
plates?
do.
Okay.
I do. But you can see these things are oozing ornamentation, right? Kincaid does not operate by the mantra less is more. More is always more, right? Like, come on, you got to have the flowering trees and the weeping willow and the sunset and the fucking cottage with the lights inside and the light reflecting, you know. This Kant is taking a stand here. This is not beauty. This is not the object of an aesthetical judgment. That is something else. I mean, I would suggest it's pukey. I don't know what his word for it would be. But his larger point, you know, getting serious, his larger point is that the beauty of an artistic object is made or lost in the form, and it is not the color that determines it. The color is part of the category of ornaments that could do harm to the beauty of an object. So there you go. I wonder what y'all think of that. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Anybody upset by that claim? Intrigued? Agree? He wrote this in the late 1700s before, I guess, maybe there's certain artists you could point to that, you know, offer a nice rebuttal. Yes, Sunbeam.
I feel like I actually don't disagree with him. I guess just cause like in my high school that I went to, it was very fine arts based, and I distinctly remember one of my teachers telling me that there is like this hierarchy to fine art where things that are like the hierarchy was basically like at the bottom are black and white still lives, and then colored still lives, black and white portraits, color portraits, and so on. Basically, the bigger it was and the more figures it had, and if it was also in color, it was just considered worth more or like more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is kind of dumb. Because I feel like Kant's not entirely incorrect when he says that color color is mostly a charm, but what's more important is the form. But at the same time, I feel like I still do kind of disagree with him, where I feel like color it exists in art because it does charm the viewer into looking at it, because it can enhance the sort of feeling that you get from looking at the art, but that doesn't devalue it just because it's used as an attention grabber.
Well, you put it best, Sunbeam, at the very beginning here when you said that what purpose does color serve in art? It draws our attention to the form. So it can assist in the viewing of beauty, but it's not determinative of the beauty of an object, and it could harm the beauty of an object if it is misused.
Yeah, like Yeah, with like color theory and stuff. A technique that I was taught when I learned how to oil paint was like finding the color within color. So an apple wasn't always red; it had a little bit of blue in it, or it had a little bit of yellow in that highlight, or even like purple. If you looked closely enough and wanted to exaggerate the colors. And there were some paintings that turned out really beautifully when you applied that technique, and then some others that just like were bad. Um, to put it simply, I guess. I guess I'm just not sure. By like form of beauty, are we saying like if we removed the color from like a Michelangelo and then looked at it like just as it is without that color,
Yeah.
and if we still found it to be attractive, would that be like a truly beautiful thing to the viewer? Or that's
You're
what
asking that question?
yeah, because like I don't know, kind of don't get what he's saying. um
Wait, put your question again, and then we'll see what McShafe has to say. So can you put your question one more time, Sunbeam?
yeah, so if Kant says that like color is just a charm and it isn't determinant of beauty, can we even take like a movie like, I don't know, uh like like animated movies, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Certain shots in, let's say, like the Prince of Egypt, where color is essential to the work, um or like a Michelangelo painting, if we stripped it of its color just to look at its form that way, and we still found it to be attractive, would that like make it truly beautiful then? Or
Well, I'm not sure how to answer your question beyond putting it the way he does, which is that it is the form that determines the beauty, and it's color that could undo it.
so it's just what exactly is form?
Well, he says in your translation, it's the delineation, the outline, the line, inner, outer, the shape, I guess. It's amazing you're asking that question, because for him that would have been a no-brainer. But of course, in the 21st century, after people like Rothko and Barnett Newman, we have to explain what, and Jackson Pollock, we have to explain what form is, because suddenly there were painters in the 20th century that the sum total of what they did was color, right? Let's see what I see that Joey has some questions, but McShafe, you had your hand up first.
By Kant's own definition, beauty is determined by a subjective aesthetic judgment, right?
Yeah.
So I strongly disagree with what he's saying about charm. I was with him until he started talking about charm, and I was so mad about it. I tried to figure out a way to work it into the midterm, but I couldn't figure it out. But here's the thing: aesthetic has the same root as anesthetic, which is like something applied to you to make you not feel things, right? So a lot of the time, people reduce aesthetic to like the way something looks, like, oh, that's a cute like Instagram filter on that, what a nice aesthetic. But it's not about like the surface way that things look. It's about like how an image or experience makes you feel. Like how you feel when you look at the sunset.
Yes.
Beauty isn't in the form, it's in the feeling, like the some experience of witnessing something that's beautiful. And I think charm, the ability to like attract people and like create delight in experiencing something, like charm is kind of the height of beauty. And it's okay for beauty to be like tacky and cheesy, if it's something that resonates with you personally. Like I just moved, so I was in Goodwill the other day, and I saw this really tacky looking like piggy bank with like drawings of like paintings of construction equipment on it, and it was very silly looking, but like the style of the painting on it, it just struck me so much as like really beautiful. And like I don't remember anything else I saw in the Goodwill. I just remember this silly little piggy bank because I thought it was very beautiful and it was charming. I think it's about like the way it causes emotions and personal touchstones to resonate in the viewer. That's what charm is all about. And like that makes something beautiful much more than like having good form. And this argument is kind of like, it's ahistorical to like blame Kant for this because it was before that time. But I think when you look at other art movements that came after that and things like Italian futurism and like other fascist art movements that would talk about things like, you know, good art and bad art, or like define art entirely by like good taste and very strict stylistic narratives of it, all about like being objectively determinable by form. Like that's kind of using the same language that Kant's using about beauty, and it makes me mad.
That's great. I'm glad you're mad. Good to be mad. Well, here, let me do something. I want to, I think, well, oh, sorry. I see that Joey had a question. So from that perspective, Jackson Pollock's oeuvre is all charm. Well, here's the kicker. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to show you Kincaid. Okay, here's Kincaid, right? Drink it in. Feel your blood pressure sink. And here is Keene. I'm not sure how that makes me feel. And then here is some Pollock. Was Pollock aiming to make beauty? Was Kincaid? See, I think Kincaid, he's trying to make beautiful paintings. He's trying to capture beauty, convey beauty. In Kant's estimation, he fucked up royally. But here's the thing, which we're going to see when we get to Danto in about a week. After Manet in the 1870s, suddenly beauty no longer becomes the driving goal of art. Artists have a different aim. So I think the short answer to what Kant, to Joey's question is, what do we make about Pollock? Beauty was not his goal. Beauty was not his aim. So we can't judge him we can't say he failed because he didn't aim to achieve that, right? It's someone like Kincaid that is trying too hard and adding in various things, yet another flowering tree, yet another ornamental bush, yet another ridiculously charming house. I also realized listening to McShafe that, again, we're a little bit, the English language, we're again a little bit shorthanded here. As we had the problem with love, right? We use the word love and there's many different types of it. Charm can also be many different things, right? Sunbeam mentions it can be magic. There's a charming person. But when we talk about art and design, charm in art and design, I think what Kant is referencing, that aspect that tries in a misguided, cloying way to conjure beauty. I would also give example of, there's a shopping mall, if you guys ever been up to Hunt Valley where the Wegmans is. Hunt Valley. Oh, Meg, I see your hand. Let me just get this out. Hunt Valley Mall is an outdoor mall that they made into a little main street. I don't know if you guys have seen these things. These are popular now, right? The enclosed shopping mall is on the way out. And now the vogue is to you create a new main street and you put the shops on either side, just like an old main street. And then you'll put a fountain in the middle, and then you put like wrought iron benches, and you have a brick sidewalk, right? And then another area mall, they have a fountain in the middle. And then Hunt Valley, they have a fire pit, right? An old fashioned fire pit right in front of the California Pizza Kitchen, and that is charm, right? They're trying to be charming. They're trying to evoke something else. But there's something superficial about it. That's the point, right? There's something superficial in this attempt to achieve beauty or invoke beauty, maybe even disingenuous. Because Hunt Valley is not really beautiful, right? Mount Vernon is much more beautiful, but Hunt Valley is trying to do it on the cheap. They'll have a parking lot with plastic shops, and they'll put like Victorian walkways on top to make it look, right? You slap on these ornaments. That's charm that Kant has in mind. All right, Meg.
Okay, so I guess I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, I just said this in the Discord, but like this conversation is really making me hope that we read Sontag's notes on camp.
Well,
But
we're not, but you can.
I mean, I have multiple times. Everyone else should, but
Well, maybe I'll include it.
I don't know.
Not a bad idea.
One thing that I was thinking about when we were having this conversation is in one of my responses to Symposium, I think I like tried to get at this concept about art, but I mentioned like materials based versus concept based practices, which I think was the wrong terminology, even though there is kind of like a level of superficiality there. But like when I'm thinking about it and how like artists may be moved to not have their aim be beauty, I think that
They should not have their aim be what?
no, at a certain point, like artists, like we were talking about how like
Yes.
Pollock was not trying to make like beautiful
Yes.
stuff. I think there's also a certain level of the kind of distance and stuff that we have to view art at, where like once the work becomes less about like beauty and aesthetics and kind of more maybe like personal or gritty or like imbued with complications, it gets harder and harder and harder to be able to view it from that like impersonal kind of not based in context standpoint, because it becomes kind of just more intertwined with that, making it harder to be like, I don't know. I was thinking about like Fiona Apple and how I think she's very charming, but like I don't know if it's objectively like beautiful because she like it gets weird and deeply personal and hard, and I think that might complicate things.
Good. Well, I go back to the point I was saying earlier. I think what he's getting at here, and he gets at it towards the end of that quote I read for you all in section 14, is that again, charm is trying to achieve or overcome for beauty, but on the cheap. In the way that shopping mall is. In the way, what he really references on that in that section 14 is he also references like the frame, right? If you're trying to emphasize the beauty of a piece or make up for its lack thereof with a fucking amazing frame, right, you have a problem on your hands. But he also wants to make the point that a frame could detract from the beauty of a piece. This just occurred to me, and I don't know what to do with it, but I'm going to show it to you all. You might have been too young to remember this, so maybe this is for Joey and Tanya and me, but I remember, was it 10 years ago or more, that they refurbished the Sistine Chapel. And when they refurbished the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, suddenly everybody was horrified at the colors that were unveiled. So I'm going to show you what these look like. And it's been, see, look at this. I mean, it's been a while since I don't remember the terms of the debate, but I do believe some people were like, what the fuck? This is not what Michelangelo meant. Or the conversation was something like, what? Did he really mean this? Because if he really meant this, those colors look pretty garish, What was he thinking? So I don't know. Does anybody remember this debate, or is this too ancient history for you all?
It kind of reminds me also of how people reacted to learning that all the sculptures and buildings in ancient Greece and Rome were painted.
Yeah.
Like they had very bright, vibrant colors.
Yeah. That's true. That's right.
Which back then, I mean, would have been like probably considered the height of beauty, but like from our lens is gaudy and garish, like you said.
Right. Now, again, the operative point here is when I show you these painting, the refurbished Sistine Chapel is, do the colors detract from or undermine the beauty of the form? And I don't need an answer from you. I'm just telling you that's the consideration here, right? That's Kant's key consideration. Sunbeam already indicates she likes them, so that's cool. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? Oh, McShafe, you're referencing the figures on ceiling? They had dark skin? No. Oh.
The Greco-Roman statues. A lot of people didn't want to widely publicize that they used to be painted really bright, gaudy colors because some of them had darker skin.
Interesting.
And they liked spreading the narrative that basically there were no Black people in that location at that time.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that a lot of statues. I remember hearing about how a lot of Greek statues tended to be made out of bronze, in order to specifically denote that the person who was being sculpted had darker skin. From what I remember, the Greeks tended to really like people with like golden, sort of like darker skin. And like Achilles, I think, was known for having like this really nice golden skin on top of having blonde hair. But I think a lot of people tend to forget that for some reason. I think part of it is because he's stated to be blonde, and the common association is, oh, he's blonde, surely he's white. But there's probably also a little more to it with the way that a lot of Europeans try to whitewash Greek history.
Any fan, thank you. By the way, what McShafe just put in the chat is pretty funny. I think I've seen that before. Yeah, I mean, one thing that we can, just on the note of skin color, one of the things that we completely ignore today is that Rome would have been a multicultural society. And I mean, like, visibly diverse. You would have had people from all different continents there, and that's often lost and forgotten today. And just, for anybody interested in any etymology fans out there, the German word he uses is Reiz. Reiz. So you could always look that up and see, that's the German that he's using for charm. Emerald.
I had comments on the skin tone situation with Greek. I have a Greek roommate, and I learned a lot about the different ways of the Greek people describing each other. And that, well, one thing, if you ever noticed on like the artwork that the men were always dark and the women were always painted with white, was because that having dark skin was seen as a feature, as someone who worked outside and was strong and stuff like that, because they were always outside, and they got a tan because Greek people had an amount of melanin in their body to do that. And so men with darker skin, and like everyone was saying, was seen as desirable because it was showing a sign of strength, which wasn't always like, I know in other cultures that is seen as being poor or working class, which is interesting how things like that get interpreted. But I also know that like the way how people were referred to each other, I don't know the exact words, but like something about where they're from and like their skin tone being a certain way had to do with like that they thought was like genetically like genetically like alongside their strength or something like that. So like people from mountains would be like lighter skin because of climate and whatever, and they would view them as one certain way. But people like who were from the lower area where the sun is by the water had darker skin and were viewed as another kind of way. And I just think that's very interesting because I never actually thought about Black people being in that equation. You know, like Moors being in the area as they were referred to. Like I don't know. I just think it's interesting how like in what could be seen as predominantly white culture, how like there is differentiation in skin tone, and then now it's like they don't do that anymore because they can differentiate with other people.
Hmm.
And I always refer to like terms of like racism being like they did it to themselves and then they did it to other people. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Sure. Good. Yeah, that's interesting. Good. All righty then. Anybody else want to chime in? Good. Okay. Well, there's really only one last thing to discuss here with Kant, then I can let you all go. And it's his idea of free and dependent beauty. And at this point, he talks, about pure aesthetic judgments. And what is a pure aesthetic judgment? Well, again, now we can't always be certain, but a statement like "this rose is beautiful" is pure judgment is the pure aesthetical judgment. But then I could say that cake is beautiful. I could use that word, and when I mean that, when I say it, put it that way, that is not pure. That's an example of a dependent judgment. Or sorry, that is the example of dependent beauty. And what's it dependent on? Well, goes back to our discussion earlier in class about aesthetic judgments being disinterested, right? Your desire will invariably get involved, right? And say things like, wow, that is a beautiful apartment, parentheses, I wish I had it. That is a beautiful piece of cake. I wish I could eat it. That is a beautiful car. I wish I could drive it. And a free statement of beauty is a pure aesthetical judgment. And that is a judgment of something that has no utility. Now, of course, that could get murky because, well, for reasons I don't want to get into because I don't want to complicate things. But this comes up basically section this looks like section 16, okay, for your purposes. He actually gives examples of free beauty, and his examples of free beauty are flowers, which is weird. I guess he's not picking them for anyone, right? Someone in love, if you see a rose and you're like, that's a beautiful rose, you might want to pick it, suddenly becomes an object of desire, something that can further your desire, in which case it's no longer pure. But if you're just seeing the beautiful rose to stand there and be like, wow, this is fucking amazing, right? That is an example of free beauty. He gives example also of parrots and birds. Yeah, it's hard to capture a bird and use that bird for something. You can just sit on your porch and admire the blue jays coming through. Yes, McShafe, the answer is yes. I cannot eat cake, but I can recognize that is a gorgeous piece of cake, right? But then maybe you want to buy it for your lover, in which case that will advance your interest. And now it's suddenly less. If you just want to put it under glass and admire that shit, then you got yourself free beauty. Otherwise, not so free. Again, this raises the issue I want to emphasize for you all, that when it comes to function, beauty and function are divorced. They're not the same. They're not in the same universe. Okay. Examples of dependent beauty he gives: humans. You recognize that's a beautiful human over there. Well, you might be sexually interested. That is a beautiful building. And of course, horse, a horse. That's a beautiful horse. Why would that have been on his radar? Because Kant was a fan of horses. No, not really. Back in those days, you have to understand, they didn't have cars, they had horses, and horses were everywhere, right? So you would assume that's a beautiful horse. And when you see a beautiful horse, that's like saying that's a beautiful car. Like, that horse can till my field and carry me around in style, right? So, yeah. Good. And that's it, guys. That's pretty much it for today. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that stuff? There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. No, I cannot find it. There's a nice passage about the pleasure of beauty. I may have blown by it. But there is a kind of pleasure here. We hit on this point earlier. There's a kind of pleasure involved in aesthetical judgments, but it's not a physical pleasure. It's not a pleasure related to utility or function, right? It's purely an intellectual, well, not even intellectual, because it's not of intellectual objects that you can convey to others, but it is a sensory pleasure that only humans can have. Because I've indicated this in the chat earlier when I was listening to McShafe talk about anesthetic, but aesthesis means sensation in Greek. So when we talk about aesthetic pleasure, we're talking about a pleasure of the senses, but it is not a pleasure of the senses pertaining to physical desire. It is merely a pleasure of the senses pertaining to sight, hearing, smell, taste, perhaps. I don't know. They don't talk about the culinary arts. That can very easily switch into function and utility at that point, desire. But is a sensory enjoyment that does not have to do with physical desire. And I do remember one point he says that makes it different from ordinary physical desire is that the pleasure in when you behold beauty, the pleasure grows. Whereas in physical pleasure, it wanes. All right. I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to make myself available to chat to anybody who wants to. Otherwise, I will see you all on Wednesday when we will discuss the sublime and genius. Awesome stuff. Rock on. If you have any issues, don't forget, consult the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy website. Okay. Joey? You saying back?
Yeah, can I just hang back and chat with you really quick?
Absolutely. Anybody can. See y'all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. See you Wednesday.